Hi. Today we're going to talk about the world systems theory and exploitation, and this won't take long. So we talked about the world systems theory a little bit a few days ago, as it is one of the theories that anthropologists use to explain globalization. And this really builds upon Marxist ideas. So if we recall Marx, he was all about the conflict theory and suggesting that there are, for our purposes, two groups of people. There's the bourgeoisie, who are the rich, the owners of production, and then the proletariats, who are the working class. And Immanuel Wallerstein builds upon Marxist ideas of this class exploitation. So if you remember, from a Marxist perspective, we might have a bunch of factory workers working on an assembly line, making iPhones, and they're probably making very minimal wages, but it's essentially making the bigger corporation, the owners of Apple, who are the bourgeoisie, very rich. So Wallerstein applied Marxist ideas to global economic systems. So we can take the idea of taking goods from a developing country, from a third world country, processing them in Canada, and then selling them for a profit. Okay, so let's take and I'll give you an example at the end of this that should bring it all together. So an exploited country, which are often third world countries or developing countries, whatever term you want to use, and again, a lot of people are going to have a problem with those terms, so just be ready for that. They become dependent on the rich countries or the bourgeois countries, because these countries, like the United States, like Canada, like Britain, like France, have a lot of investments in certain countries, like Malaysia, like Bangladesh. And these countries, like Bangladesh and Malaysia, become dependent upon the investments of the developed world, on the technology, on the expertise, on the manufactured goods that the Western world provides. So Wallerstein essentially says, he kind of divides it, rather than bourgeoisie and proletariat, he calls it core and periphery. So the core being, let's just say, the United States, and the periphery being these developing world countries like Malaysia, Bangladesh, small African countries. So what happens is commodity prices are assigned a value based on demand and availability. So in a second, I'm going to talk to you about coffee supply. So if the coffee supply, if there's a major increase in coffee demand, it's becoming trendy again. So the demand is increased. Well, you can increase the commodity price. For some reason, if there's a drought in one of these coffee supplier countries, the supply goes down. That's going to increase the cost of coffee, which would cause me a major dent in my wallet, as coffee is likely my best friend. So what the core nations do is they set the demand, however, and then pay the periphery countries low prices for this commodity like coffee. Then the goods are processed in the core country and sold out for a profit. Now, if the periphery country wants that finished product back, it's sold back at a higher price. So the core country is profiting almost twofold off the periphery countries. Okay, and again, I'll explain this with an example in a second. So this creates kind of a global system of have and have-nots, because the core countries set the prices of these processed or finished goods. So the periphery countries can't afford to buy these countries, so it sets up a have and have-not system, and certain products are needed for a certain quality of life, and developing world countries can't afford those products. Okay, so that might be a little abstract. Hopefully this example will solidify your understanding of this. So let's take the example of coffee. So coffee beans are grown in Ethiopia, and then they are sold to coffee distributors in Mexico. I'm not totally sure of why there has to be a middleman of Mexico here. So it's almost like periphery, semi-periphery, and then the core country. So it goes coffee beans sold to distributors in Mexico. Mexico then sells the coffee beans to a larger coffee company in North America. North America then uses their refined technology and specialization to create the final product, and then it is sold at grocery stores at a significantly high price. So the coffee that we buy in the grocery store, it's a certain amount. Well, the amount that was actually spent or that actually went to that farmer in Ethiopia is quite small compared to the profit margin that was made by, Joe Jimmy Coffee or Java Coffee or whatever. So it's kind of the core, again, sets the standard and has all the power in this distribution chain. Now there is a trend to do fair trade coffee and such that tries to limit this kind of exploitation of third world farmers, but and maybe that is gaining some momentum, but I would still think this would be the commonplace, the more used trend or distribution chain. Again, not necessarily helping the developing worlds. But then again, the question is buying those coffee beans initially from the Ethiopian farmer, even though there's exploitation there, is that helping that country develop and gain an economic base, or is it exploiting them? And that's up to a lot of debate. So that's the world systems theory and the exploitation that can be involved in global economics.